There is something truly sinister going on in the UK police right now, and I'm not staying quiet anymore. The UK police have recently been accused of being draconian, authoritarian. Now, when this really came to fruition was when people were getting arrested for things they'd post online. In the UK, we don't have free speech. We have allowed speech, shall we say. You're allowed to think and believe certain things, providing that they don't cause offence, upset, distress to any other person. Such legislation allows for subjectivity, and you also don't need to be made aware of who your accuser actually is. One recent famous example was Alison Pearson, who was visited by police on Remembrance Sunday, of all days, for posting something on Twitter a year ago, of which she then deleted, but somebody somewhere found it offensive. However, it wasn't a crime, it wasn't a hate crime, it was a non-crime hate incident, meaning that you haven't committed a crime, but we're still going to come and we're still going to have a chat with you, and we're still going to put your name on our file so that if you ever have a DBS check, it will turn up and you will be classed as a racist or someone who has been investigated for stirring up hatred. Now, this can have serious effects on people's lives, but remember, it's not a crime. We're just here to make sure that you're not doing anything wrong under the guise of we're here to care for you. However, I'm sad to say that this is just the tip of the iceberg. If people really know the grand scale of things what were happening, then there would be a lot more questions asked of the police. Because not only are the police actively arresting people for things they say online and releasing prisoners, violent individuals back into the community in order to free up people and free up spaces for these thought crime criminals, the police are also pushing unethical and illegal practices in order to boost statistics, to boost funding in realms such as domestic violence. I was a police officer for just under 10 years, and I was a big advocate for investigating domestic violence. I think it's a hideous crime, and I think people that commit it should be held accountable, and victims of crime should be supported in the best possible way from the very start of when the police are called all the way through to conviction. However, unfortunately, the police, what they are now doing is they are projecting their own feelings onto a situation in order to then justify an arrest, in order to then get statistics. And with statistics comes more funding. Examples of this are, the police will get a phone call because two people have had an argument in a domestic setting. The police will arrive and they will say, what's happened? Without any kind of evidence, without any kind of justification. If somebody says, yeah, we had an argument and yeah, I got a little bit scared, that is an assault in the UK. Now people might say, okay, yes, but it's only an allegation, it doesn't mean you're going to prison. Okay, but what that allegation may do is it can alienate the victim from the police because they didn't want them to be arrested. Now, of course, in some domestic circumstances, the victim doesn't always want the perpetrator to be arrested. But this is what we need to be aware of. We need to be aware of these significant instances where there is serious domestic abuse. And if the victim doesn't want to make a complaint, look at the reasons why that is, and also look at how best you can navigate that complex situation in order to still bring the perpetrator to justice. But the cases I'm talking about aren't like that. I'm talking about ordinary, everyday people are being arrested in droves simply because the police were called. The officer goes, well, I think you would have been scared by what you've told me, therefore I'm arresting him based on what I think rather than what you are telling me. The police are fabricating evidence, they are projecting their own feelings onto people in order to not protect the victim. They're saying it's to protect the victim and to stop domestic homicide. But the reality is much different, because when somebody is arrested, they are then taken to custody. When they're in custody, chances are that that case is then passed to another team to investigate. So then why, one, do they need to justify their arrests when they're never going to be questioned about it? And if anything, they will get questioned if they didn't arrest because of the pressure from the senior officers in order to fulfill these statistics. However, what then happens is the case is passed to another unit for them to investigate. They then look at this case and go, there is no evidence here. Why was this person ever arrested? The detained person can then be held for up to 24 hours. And often when there's little evidence, you would think they would be kicked out of custody straight away, probably before even having an interview. But due to the ethos and due to the current state of policing in the UK, when it comes to surrounding issues such as domestic violence and bumping up arrests of domestic violence, those people are often left in a cell to rot, held unlawfully without any evidence whatsoever. This means that officers must then go and interview this suspected domestic perpetrator who's frankly done nothing wrong, and will then go and seek a approval from a senior officer for a no further action to happen. However, what is increasingly happening is that the senior officer in charge of making that decision to no further action to release this person without any further conditions or any reprimand, is that they are so captured by the ideology and the statistics and them wanting to climb up higher on their greasy career ladder, is that they're saying, no, we will bail with condition because we believe that we can send this to the Crown Prosecution Service as a res geste, victimless prosecution. They know that there will be no prosecution. They know that the Crown Prosecution Service have a certain threshold which crimes and incidents need to hit in order for them even to entertain the idea of a charge. But the police officers in charge of making those decisions don't want to make that decision because then it looks bad on them. This then unfortunately means that this person is then let out on bail, often for months at a time, because the officers in charge of that case are often then under-resourced with the amount of other instance what they have to deal with, meaning that that person then gets left on bail for months and months and months at a time. This can affect people's work, it can affect people's family life, it can affect people's mental health, and there have been instances where people have actually taken their own lives as a result of the stress because they have been wrongly accused of a crime they didn't commit. There was no evidence, there was no support, and instead of the officers who attended that initial incident using their brains and actually investigating this apparent crime prior to arresting, people have arguments. We can't police ordinary daily interactions. This absolute draconian practice must stop, and what you will see is you will see a correlation between the amount of arrests happening and a decrease in the detection rate. However, the police will hail that, look, we take a robust stance on domestic violence because look at all these arrests and look at this arrest increase we have over here, while completely ignoring the detection rate, meaning that more people are being arrested and less people are getting charged. It's a scattergun method of let's shoot at everything and we'll see if something sticks. It's immoral and it's wrong. We should be arresting people when there is a chance of conviction or when it's serious safeguarding concerns. And the difficulty with this is if you have a blanket approach of arrest at every single domestic incident, you are actively missing the key instance what really needs your attention. One, because you have been conditioned to act unfairly and to not ask the right questions. You've been conditioned to not give the right amount of attention and detail required to the incidents that require it. You have got very, very inexperienced police officers on the front line. In my old force, 70% of police officers that were frontline officers that you would call and get 999 assistance for had under 3 years experience. Now, of course, everyone has to start somewhere in their career. I'm not faulting the officers, it's not their fault. They are being conditioned and they are being pressured immensely to carry out these unethical practices. And it is causing irrevocable damage to the public. It is meaning that the public will lose faith in police officers. It means that the system is strained due to the extra amount of work. The inexperience in officers means that they are not able to make proper decisions. They do not know the law properly. They are unable to use life experience to determine, is this a crime? Is this likely to result in a conviction? Or is this just something which has gotten a little bit out of hand and they actually just need support? And due to their inexperience, they are less likely to push back when they are being forced to make these unethical decisions. I've had officers turn around to their superior officers at a scene and said, there is no incident here, there's no crime whatsoever, I'm not arrested. And those officers have been reprimanded. Those officers have had a senior officer ring them on their phone and demand that they must arrest because of X, Y, and Z. But more importantly, the resources what the police have and the manpower and the time what they can give to a case is diminishing day by day, week by week. And that is a result of this attitude of overreach, unethical practice, and trying to boost up statistics. The most sinister byproduct of this, though, is that we are actually putting victims at risk of further harm. It means that people are not calling the police when they genuinely need help because they are fearful of being punished when they've done nothing wrong. It also means that the people who call the police are not getting the right resources, thus putting them further at risk and meaning that they are more likely to withdraw support due to the stress and the lack of communication from the officers in the case. And it isn't the officers in the case fault. They are trying their best. They simply just cannot manage under the demanding workload. I've heard of some serious horror stories when it comes to this practice. There was a male arrested for non-fatal strangulation. He'd strangled his partner to the point where he'd caused the bruising, she could barely breathe. This behaviour happening is a huge indicator of homicide, as it increases the chance of homicide by 7-fold. So therefore you would think, okay, well, this person's been arrested for this, we need to get onto the victim as soon as possible. But that isn't what happened. The police arrested the male, put him into custody, and then no one went to speak to the victim, because the police officers that made the arrest went back to the station, completed their handover, passed it to another team, and that other team was sinking by the minute. That victim was left wondering what was going to happen for 12 hours, and then the suspect was released without any kind of evidence whatsoever, because they had not spoken to the victim. And they hadn't spoken to the victim simply because they didn't have the resources to do so. So we can say that we're doing this blanket approach to prevent homicide, and yet when we do this blanket approach, we don't support the victim who we are trying to protect. So the system is clearly failing. The real reason why this practice is happening is to do with money. Because if the police can present statistics to the Home Office when it comes to the budget, then that means they're likely to get more funding. So that's the benefit to the organisation. However, it's normally a particular officer that will bring in this ethos and will roll it out across the force, meaning that even though that they know what they're doing is wrong, they will get a promotion out of it due to the bump in statistics. So it's for personal gain too. So the organisation is there for themselves, and the people putting forward this unethical practice are there for themselves too. At what point is it there for the public? And the reason why I know it's about money is because on my channel I used to speak heavily about domestic violence, about this topic of domestic violence. I wanted to raise awareness of not only the traits of domestic violence perpetrators so that people can get the support themselves without needing the police, but also to educate the police in treating people fairly and looking at something objectively and actually investigating an incident before they decide to arrest. Because taking away someone's freedom, putting them in a cell for hours on end and then putting them on bail for months at a time can have serious mental health impacts on somebody. I would make content to try and help people who were potentially going through something bad, using my channel, use my knowledge and my platform, because when I was in the police, I was a domestic violence specialist. I did my own research on narcissism, psychopathy, borderline personality disorder, how to identify somebody who is being gaslit, who is being manipulated, who has become codependent, and who has even completely diminished the abuse which they are facing. I was trained to do all that, and I did a lot of that training myself, as well as some additional courses which have been accredited for in the police. As a result of me making this content, which I believed was to help people, I was then dragged into my office, and my senior officer sat there and told me under no circumstances was I allowed to continue to create such content in order to help people, because, and I quote, it was upsetting our partners. So the partner agencies that work alongside the police were getting upset at me because I was taking their business away from them. So let's think about it. Two people have an argument, the police arrive, police make an arrest, that person is then charged, NFA'd, whatever, but the police get the arrest statistic, therefore they can present that to the Home Office when it comes to their budget review. Then what happens is the domestic violence services and the charities in place to then support the victims can then support that victim, and they will get funding for that too. If I don't raise awareness and crisis happens, somebody gets hurt, organisations make money. If I do raise awareness and I stop that from happening and they decide to leave the relationship, nothing happens. No police call, no support from domestic violence services, no money. I was told to stop talking about domestic violence online because it benefited the organisation who are there to apparently protect people and support victims of domestic abuse. The police and the organisations involved would rather you need to call them and would rather you have to be hurt in order for that to happen, rather than you be made aware of the trait and you leave before that ever happens, because it's all to do with money. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go over to my Patreon only section and discuss some real life events which I've been involved in, which will make your head spin. They claim that the force that I was working for and others further afield were deliberately breaking the law daily to impose their own political ideology and ethos onto the public. And sadly, this is the state of modern policing right now. It's draconian, it's authoritarian, it's the overreach is too much. The officers that are given the power to make such decisions oftentimes should not be in that position. And you certainly don't expect it to be arrested for posting something on Facebook when they're letting out burglars. People want the burglars arrested and kept in prison. People don't want the people online posting things. People don't want to be so fearful of having an argument with their partner that the police are called. And people also don't want to be so scared of calling the police when there is a serious domestic incident situation unfolding, control and coercive behaviour, abuse, and they call the police and they're not believed, or they are believed and then they're just left alone. They're believed in the sense of the police will make an arrest, but they won't give them the support afterwards. And we also don't want people that are arrested wrongly and the police justifying that the arrest was necessary, proportionate, justified, completely based off a statistics quota and the model they're trying to reinforce. And then that person is left on bail for months and months and their life is irrevocably changed forever and ruined. But like I said, this is the state of modern policing and it's truly awful what's happening. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to like and subscribe. And also, if you want to hear more about these kind of stories, then click the link in my description below. And there is a link to my up and coming book, The Job is Fucked, The Secret Diary of a Police Officer, currently available for pre-order on Amazon at the time of making this video. But click it anyway, because it might be out by the time you watch it.